Hi everybody, welcome to Church History Insights and Questions with me, David Eaton. This episode is going to be a little bit different. I wanted to try to do something a bit different, and I was thinking a lot about prejudices. I was thinking a lot about our discriminatory attitudes that we sometimes display, and I want to talk a little bit about that, probably under the heading of biases. And you might think, well, why? You might think, am I biased? Well, I am. If you're asking me if I am biased, the answer is almost certainly yes. If you think about it, I'm a man, I'm a white man, I'm a heterosexual man. I'm also a religionist. I'm a member of a Christian church. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I've been a member for over 53 years, and so that is bound to shape my every thought and my every attitude, and so I'm bound to be biased and would suggest that we are all biased. And biases have been shaping our lives from the very beginning, and will probably continue to do so. So yes, I do think it's constructive to look at the different kinds of biases and see whether we have them or not, and then maybe ask some questions about, well, if we do have them, what can we do about that? I'm really grateful to my daughter, who some years ago bought me a book. It was called Sway, S-W-A-Y. It was written by Dr. Pragya Agarwal, PhD. And the book went through what she saw as some of the major biases that affect human nature, not just me, but everybody. And it was a bit disconcerting, because as I went through this book, and some of these I was aware of, some of the biases, but some I wasn't. And as I looked at each one, and I asked myself, well, have I got this? And pretty much most of them I could put a tick in that box. So it was an instructive experience for me. I want to just share some of these, or a few of these biases, and together we can see whether they affect us. If they do affect us, we can ask the question, well, what can I do about that? I'm going to go through some of these alphabetically, and I'm going to start with an accent bias. And accents are a way of defining ourselves and others. And studies show that any accent that is not similar to our own is immediately characterized as foreign. Now, my accent, as you can clearly tell, I speak what used to be the Queen's English, but now I speak the King's English because I've upgraded. And so whenever I hear an accent that is slightly different, what effect does that have on me? Well, I'm not exactly sure, but I'm sure it does have an effect. And so we need to be aware of different accents. And sometimes we'll hear an accent and we will assign it into a particular kind of category, something to be aware of. The second one that I wanted to talk about is attractiveness bias. And studies have ranked those that they deemed to be most attractive. They ranked them as having the most positive traits. So a correlation between attractiveness as an individual and the most positive traits. Attractiveness across the board, not just appearance, but attractiveness in personality, just a person. The third one I want to look at is called availability bias. This is an over-reliance on data that is easily available, readily available. The more we hear something around us, the more we believe it. And sometimes we don't examine data that is less available to us. I want to go then to look at beauty bias, and you might think that is the same as attractiveness, but it isn't, because this is purely about the looks of a person, not about their character, not about their personality, but just their looks. And this occurs when a person is viewed as more capable professionally, just based on their looks. And this bias creates a halo effect, where a person considered aesthetically pleasing is seen as hard-working and talented compared to other people. The next I want to look at is called binary bias. This goes back a very, very long way, and it's completely embedded in the human psyche. It goes all the way back to Aristotle, 350 BC. That's, 2,370 years ago. He was the first to propose the theory of dualism, imposing a dual hierarchy on everything. He argued, amongst other things, that men and women have irreconcilable philosophical differences, and that women are inherently inferior to men. He is considered the founder of sex polarity. As I mentioned, that is ingrained in our human lives, and it'll probably be mostly unconscious in all of us, but it probably comes out in different ways and is something to be aware of. Now I want to jump to confirmation bias, and this is significant to me and probably to anybody else who happens to be a member of a church. In my case, as I mentioned, it's the LDS Church, or AKA the Mormon Church. And so confirmation bias, how does it work? Well, it's the tendency to seek out and prefer information that supports our pre-existing beliefs. As a result, we tend to ignore any information that contradicts those beliefs. And so I've found over recent years that confirmation bias is definitely alive and well in and around me and my circle of acquaintances, particularly in the church. And so it is something that we do need to be aware of. And when we're looking for information, try to look at the sources of those information, the reliability of those sources, particularly if you're looking into church history, to bring us back to church history insights and questions. If you're looking into church history, try to look at sources that are closest to the contemporaries that are being talked about, and try to understand where these sources come from and check them, check everything, and then go back and check it again to make sure that you're clear on those sources that you're looking at. The next, is double bind bias, kind of going through these somewhat alphabetically. And there are two sort of interpretations of a double bind bias. One is where an individual receives two or more messages, with one is often negating the other messages. And often when that happens, we slant towards that particular message. And the other interpretation of double-blind bias is particularly affects women, and particularly women in the workplace, who are seen either as meek or too meek, or they are seen as assertive or too assertive. And that's referred to as a double-blind bias. Familiarity bias comes next. It's a psychological phenomenon that the more we're exposed to something, the more likable that person, object, or situation is likely to be. Frequency bias, a combination of attention and confirmation bias, where we're seeing something, the same something, more frequently or often, and the more we see it, the more we believe it. Doesn't necessarily mean that it is true or the most accurate or the safest or most secure information that we are looking at. And then we come to another big one, which affects everybody, gender bias. Gender stereotypes are formed very early on and are deeply embedded in our societies and in our human psyches. They are all pervasive, and they continue to create inequalities between men and women. We all suffer from gender bias. If you think you don't, you probably do. And it's worth thinking about it, excuse me, and looking at it in more detail. Excuse me. A serious frog in the throat situation. The next I want to look at is called in-group, out-group bias. Fairly straightforward. The division between in-groups and out-groups is a process of categorization, a fundamental cognitive function. We classify plants as edible or poisonous, tools as useful or broken, and people as friends or foes. And we're all in groups, and then there are lots of out groups, and how we perceive and treat people in those in groups is quite different to how we regard people in the out groups. It's something to definitely think about. Intersectional bias is a very interesting one. And let me just talk to you about that. A single defining feature of stigma is difficult to define. While a woman may experience sexism, a black lesbian will not only experience sexism, but they will also experience racism and homophobia. So it's the intersectionality of those three biases that they are victims of. So the bias is coming from others towards them that make it a particularly horrific, sometimes, situation for them to be in. Loss aversion bias is a focus on not losing money rather than actively pursuing ways to obtain money or gaining money. Let's look at male firstness bias. This is a terminology bias, but it's very ingrained in our backgrounds and in our thinking. So that's why we say husband and wife. We very rarely say wife and husband. That's why we say brother and sister. We rarely say sister and brother. And that's why we say man and woman. We rarely say woman and man. One of the exceptions would be we say ladies and gentlemen, typically. which I think is wonderful. In our church, or my church situation, the term brothers and sisters is very frequently used and has been forever and a day. And there have been many, many times when leaders have been speaking to a joint audience, so that there are men and women in the audience, but they have only sometimes referred to brothers or brethren when they have been addressing this audience, this congregation. I think in more recent times in the LDS Church, we are hearing a bit more sisters and brothers rather than always brothers and sisters. Personally, I really like the term ladies and gentlemen. I think it's got a more gracious ring to it. But that's male firstness bias. It's alive and well and kicking. The next is negativity bias. It's a tendency to react more strongly to and remember any negative information. Negative information seems to stick in our minds sometimes more than positive information does. And so it's called a negativity bias. The next is called a normative conformity bias. We believe unconsciously that by conforming to others' views, we will be liked and accepted by them more. So we tend to agree, we tend to go along with, we tend to accept conforming to others. The next is one that I had not heard of before, and it's a bit scary. It's called pain bias, and it's about women. Women in studies that they've done in hospitals, women reporting acute pain are less likely than men to get the strongest painkillers. I was a bit shocked when I heard that. That's a bit frightening. I do hope that changes very, very quickly. Pain bias, perceptual bias. We focus on differences between individuals, exaggerating those of our in-groups and out-groups more than is true to reality. So if you're thinking about your in-group, you will probably have very, very positive feelings about them, and those positive feelings might be exaggerated beyond reality. Conversely, when you think of people in an out group, different group altogether, those negative feelings might be pronounced, again, more than actual reality exists. That's referred to as perceptual bias. The next is political partisan bias. Partisans displays systematic tendencies to seek out, believe, and remember information that supports their political beliefs and affinities. So that's fairly understandable. If you have strong political views, then you're obviously going to gather with others who hold the same views, listen to others who hold the same views, read information that is coming from the party that you experience. And I suppose the message, the key underlying message, is to also understand the other party's views as clearly as you do your own, so that you can be sure that you have the full and clear picture. Present bias is a tendency to give more importance to a sooner trade-off than one that is going to come along a bit later. Racial bias, a form of prejudice that generally includes negative emotional reactions to members of the group, acceptance of negative stereotypes, and racial discrimination against individuals. And sadly, as we all know, in some cases this can lead to violence. So our racial discrimination, our racial biases, we need to be very clear and very aware of how we are feeling in that particular regard. Recall or hindsight bias, I kind of realized that I can definitely have this one. It's where you say, oh, I knew that, I knew it, or I thought it would happen like that. Yeah, recall or hindsight bias. Representative bias, we assume that our recollections are representative and true, tending to discard events outside our immediate memory. Memory is a fickle friend, and it's about as reliable as I don't know what, but it's not very reliable. But we tend to think that my memory is perfectly fine. It's perfectly clear. I remember exact detail. Well, no, probably not. Social desirability bias, we tend to go for the option we feel would be more socially desirable. We're thinking about how it's going to be received, so we go for the one that we think will be socially more desirable. Status quo bias. When in doubt, do nothing. It holds us back from doing good, from doing better things, from doing things that are going to be more productive, not only for ourselves, but for other people. Status quo bias. Stereotype bias. This is where deciding who you will interview based on their names. And I was interested in something that Dr. Pragya Agarwal said in her book, because she was applying for 12 different positions in similar organizations on one occasion. And she decided to do a little bit of an experiment. And she's an Indian lady. And for 6 of these jobs, she just used her straight Indian name, Pragya Agarwal. On the other 6, she used her English husband's name as well. So it became a double-barreled name, but it was an English name. And she discovered that the 6 that she sent with the English name, she was invited to every single one of those interviews. Where she only used her Indian name, she only got 1 invitation back out of the 6. Stereotype bias. It's how we think about people, based on names, based on accents, based on lots of other different things, based on attractiveness, etc., based on beauty, etc., but not based on actual, real data. The next is structural bias, and this is where inequalities exist due to societal structure or organizational structure, and they're not necessarily implicit on an individual basis. I was thinking about the church that I'm a member of, the LDS Church, when I was thinking about this structural bias. and I was trying to ask myself, is there structural bias inherent within the church, and not just the LDS church, but perhaps all churches or many churches? And I think the answer that I got was almost certainly. And I think in the LDS church, that is a concern and is a challenge, because the church is structured with a priesthood hierarchy, which is male only, and so that almost inevitably imposes a structural bias, because it means that wherever decisions are made, they are typically made only by men. And so that's an inherent bias. And it would be extremely good if we all understood that and took that on board and made adjustments accordingly based on that structural bias. And then the penultimate one I wanted to just talk about was truth bias. We are more likely to believe that what the other person is telling us is the truth than to question its credibility. And so it's a general situation that whenever somebody is telling us something, we tend to believe that that is true. It might not be true. It's not necessarily true, but we tend to believe that it is true rather than to challenge it, rather than to go away and think about it, rather than to go away and do some research to find out if it indeed is true. And then finally, I want to talk about something which is referred to as weight bias, and it comes under these two acronyms, ATOP, which stands for attitudes toward obese people, and BAOP, which stands for beliefs about obese people. And I think that this is not something that we probably hear a huge amount about, but I think that it's something that's redolent within our society, and that we, maybe unconsciously, we have a biased attitude towards obese people. We have a biased belief towards obese people. And so it's something that if we are more aware of within ourselves, it is something we can begin to control and to make sure it doesn't affect our dealings with, our attitudes towards, our love for, our acceptance of people who are obese. So that kind of brings me to the end of the biases that I wanted to just go through. I want to now ask a question, and that is how do we reduce the tendency towards biases? And I'm just going to read something that'll kind of end it all here with some advice. The advice comes from reputable sources, and it says, practice self-awareness by questioning your assumptions and understanding your own biases. Think about the biases that you might have. Do you have these biases? If you're sitting there thinking, well, this isn't anything to do with me, I don't have any biases, well, you probably do. We all do. I'm riddled with them, and you may have more than you might have even thought of. Understand your own biases, engage in perspective taking by putting yourself in others' shoes. So if we go back to the last one that we looked at, attitudes towards obese people, beliefs towards obese people, put yourself in their shoes. You're now an obese person. How does it feel? How do you feel? How do other people feel towards you? That's the start of learning how to deal with the biases and prejudices that we all have. Seek diverse experiences by broadening your social circles and consuming diverse media to challenge your preconceived notions. If you just get your media from one source, then that might not be helpful to you. It might be better to look at a number of different sources so that you're seeing everybody's side of and everybody's opinion on every issue that you're looking at. Additionally, use structured decision making. Slow down your thinking process and implement feedback mechanisms so that you get feedback on how you're doing, etc., to check your judgments and make more equitable decisions. Thanks for being with us on this episode, looking at prejudices, discriminatory behaviors, biases, etc. I hope it's been of some help, of some interest. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you like it, please like it. Subscribe if you haven't already done so. And we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.